Hi again. I want to conclude this section on egoism and the good for human beings and, King Midas and Aristotle and all that sort of stuff with a question. What do you think, as an American, is the greatest event of 1776? I would assume you as an American would say, the Declaration of Independence. Now, if you're in British Isles, you might want to say, well, Adam Smith's publication of The Wealth of Nations. And if books have power and ideas have consequences, that might not be a bad answer, right? Because what the Wealth of Nations did was laid out the foundations for a kind of free market capitalism. It emphasized liberty and markets. And underneath it was a kind of egoism developed by Adam Smith that I want to look at, not the egoism that we've just looked at, but an emphasis on the pursuit of self-interest and where we get with it. Now, the book opens with a description of a pin factory, and it's a kind of forerunner of the division of labor. And I'll let you look into that, but it shows how if you divide up the labor, you can make many, many more pins, all right, by using more men. But in another section of the book, he starts talking about what motivates production. Okay, and he comes up with this some famous quotes, and I'm just going to give them to you. You can take a look at the slides to see them later. But it's this: it's not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. Thus, in economic matters, we address ourselves not to the humanity, but to their self-love. And we never talk to them of our own necessities, but of their advantages. Okay? You're not going to get bread and meat and ale, right, from people because they are benevolent. They might do it for a while, but then they're going to get tired. All right? It's going to have to be in their interest to be a baker. All right? And you're not going to get it to say, I need it. You're going to have to give them something in return. This is Smith's notion of the market. It's his suggestion of what makes things go. And the division of labor. All right? If one man makes the whole dress or the whole suit or the whole set of clothes, it's going to be there forever. But you get somebody to make the thread, somebody to get sheep, etc., etc. And it's a wonderful thing to behold. And that's the market. And then I give you something and you give me something in exchange for that. All right? All right. Now, what Smith then indicates, and this is something up for sometimes up for grabs, and people want to disagree with it. All right. By pursuing their own interest, the person generally, indeed, neither intends to promote the public interest, nor knows how much he is promoting it. And by intending only his own gain, he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. So here's the invisible hand, and here's the blessing of pursuing one's own self-interest. Because if everybody pursues their own self-interest and then they trade with one another, all right, everybody will be better off. All right, and that's the theory behind the free market, okay? It's a kind of enlightened self-interest. Now, along with that, guess what? If you've read any of the Milton Friedman that you've had to read, all right, you come up with the corporate responsibility notion of Friedman. Let people be free. Let them exchange goods. Let them do all that stuff. The primary and only responsibility of business is to maximize profit for the shareholder. Make it worth the shareholder's interest, and then he'll have his company produce these things, and other people will buy them, and it will be a free market, and everybody will get richer. All right? Now, that works up to a point. All right? And then you get the kind of greed accumulation that you see with Aristotle. Now, I just want to reflect for a minute on Adam Smith, because usually people leave off there and say, That's Adam Smith of the free market. I want to remind you that what I call the rest of the story. Adam Smith was a moral philosopher to begin with, probably the first business ethicist then. And he starts in a book he wrote prior to The Wealth of Nations, a book called The Theory of Moral Sentiments, by saying this: howsoever selfish man may be supposed, there are evidently some principles in his nature which interest him in the fortune of others, and render their happiness necessary to him, though he derives nothing from it, except the pleasure of seeing it. That is, Smith is not a total egoist, at least not a total psychological egoist. He doesn't buy into that economic determinism where you've got to look out for yourself. You are interested in the fortune of others. That's part of you. That's your moral sentiment. So this is working. And that leads Smith to these last words that are very rarely quoted, and I want to quote them for you. Every man is left perfectly free to pursue his own interest in his own way, and to bring both his industry and capital into competition with those of every other man or order of man. So we want freedom, we want competition, we want industry, all right? But what Smith adds is this: he's free to do this as long as he does not violate the laws of justice. And I take that to mean that you've got a free market, and if you let the free market go, that's fine, as long as what the free market is doing is not violating the laws of justice. Now we're going to have to talk about the demands of justice and the question of economic justice a little bit further on. Okay, but that should set the scene for what I want to discuss in the third week, and that's the scene of the corporate responsibility debate. We've got Friedman's argument, which says the primary responsibility of business is to maximize shareholders' value. You got Ed Freeman's argument, okay, which says, no, we've got responsibilities to other stakeholders. We've got these responsibilities of justice to other stakeholders. And then in my own humble way, I've got a view in there that examines the whys of business. And there are two kinds of whys. There's psychological whys, and there are purpose whys. There's the whys of motivation and the whys of purpose. What's the purpose of business? I want to say the purpose of business is to produce goods and services. That's why society allows businesses to exist. That's why they do exist. There's a why of motives, though. Why do people get into business? They get into it out of their own self-interest, of course. So we've got to bring these motives and purposes into balance. And that'll be an area where we can discuss very, very frankly. Okay, but to mix up the purpose of business with the whys of business, and I think that's, from my perspective, Friedman's problem, to mix those up is like mixing up the engine of the train, what gets you there, to the destination of the train. Let's say you want to take the train to New York, right? Going to New York is the purpose. The engine is what gets you there. Self-interest, freely expressed, is the engine, right, of the markets. Right? The purpose of the markets is to produce goods and services. How we can bring those all together is going to be our challenge.